everyone, welcome to another episode of Use It or Lose It. And I think today is going to be a fun video. If you haven't checked the previous videos in the series, I will put a link here to the playlist. I made 3 videos going over, like, playing around with my wax pastels, hard pastels, or hard and soft, you know, those chalky pastels. And then the last one posted last week, I think it was oil pastels. So before I move on, I thought today I would try to combine all of my favorites from the 3 episodes. And I'm really glad you're enjoying it. And I think it'll just be fun to kind of see what works together. I think if you're a mixed media artist, one of the challenges sometimes is how to combine like all of the things that you love. So today I'm going to try it, and I will list all of the supplies below. One unfortunate result of the series that was completely, you know, counterproductive was the purchase of this set. But I played with these, and they're beautiful. But I got the, like, you know, smaller, like the half size. This is the Sennelier set, and these are gorgeous. The pigmentation is gorgeous, and some of the colors here are just lovely. Like these kind of taupey colors, love them, and the blues are just gorgeous. Yeah, I'm thinking that probably oil pastels are a better fit for me. But today we're just going to play with everything, kind of try some of the ideas that, my page is already dirty, the ideas that I already have. The paper I'm using, this is just like student grade. I'll show you the packaging. I don't even know if this is like some special edition or something like this. It doesn't really have a name, you know, it's aquarelle. It's really heavyweight, which is nice. And it has kind of a cold pressed texture. This is for sure cellulose paper, and I'll show you the texture. You can see, really lovely. I really like this kind of texture. Kind of reminds me of fabric, like natural fabrics. So I really like that. I don't care that it's a little bit dirty. So I'm going to use, I'll tell you what I picked, like my favorites from everything. I have the Neocolor 1 and the Neocolor 2, but I don't know if I'll be using these. I have the soft pastels, which I liked a lot better than the hard pastels. And this is the Sennelier set, and then here I have a little Jackson set, which I really love, 2 of the fluorescent colors, and then the orange one is just not my color. And then I have oil pastels. And I'm going to paint one of my regular go-to things, just because it's like fun for me, and it's what I mostly paint, and it's not so slow, so, you know, we can do this start to finish, hopefully in one video. And the colors I'm going to use are the colors that I showed you in the beginning of the month. The March Color Club, as I like to call it. So that's what I'm going to use, and of course there's a dedicated video to that, so you can see all of the colors. I'm going to switch to voiceover and just go with the flow and enjoy all of these products and see if they work together. One thing before I start, I really believe this. If you are like me and you're very drawn to color, and you have like this, you know, relationship with color, that certain colors make you super happy, and then others, if you paint something with them, you can never fall in love with your painting. I really recommend focusing on color and not necessarily on product. So that means if, you know, I'm really loving this particular pink, then I'm gonna use that, even if maybe in theory an oil pastel would work better. So just like learn to use what you have. And one last thing, the brush that I'm going to use is this one, and this is the Orange, I can't never remember how to pronounce it. Orange Synthetic by Tracy Lebenson, and his beautiful brushes. He has like a huge range. You can find them on his website. There's a link below, and it is an affiliate link. But I love these brushes. I have a ton of brushes. I don't have to use these. I can use other ones. And these are just so much fun to use. You get a lifetime warranty, and until April, there's a 20% off code. So this, to me, I like to start my paintings with either this Big Mama or this kind of medium size. They're both great. Because this is not huge, I think I'll start with this one. And yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say. Okay, so let's start painting. Okay, I sped this up just a little so that the video is not super long. And I have to say, I loved this process. And I really don't think I could have gotten here without the previous videos. So I'm really seeing the value and benefits of kind of dedicating time to play with one medium, and then it's just overwhelming, especially if you have, you have inks, you have pens, you have pencils, you have pastels. I'm still wondering, once I move on to other categories, I can only imagine it will get a bit more challenging to really try and kind of combine everything together. But obviously you don't need to use every product you own on one painting, and I think this just kind of gives me the confidence to, if, for example, I really want to add a particular color that I only have in a soft pastel or in an oil pastel, I think it just gives me the confidence to go for it and really just feel comfortable with all of my supplies. So let's talk a little bit about the process. I'm starting with my Neocolor 1 wax pastels. I love these. They are, as you can see, they're like kind of hard wax pastels. They act as a beautiful resist to watercolors, and they come in a nice range of colors. Again, the great thing about most of these, proper... Okay, maybe proper is not, but products that are aimed at artists as opposed to crafters is that besides having all the information of pigments and having a really high quality of a product, you can buy things open stock. So it's very easy to pick colors that work for you and not have to buy a set if, you don't want all the colors, or you'll never use a yucky brown. No offense to yucky browns. So I started with those. They're my favorite for this kind of, I don't know if I can even call it an underpainting, because they resist the watercolor, so you can still see all of them once the painting is done. But they're perfect for that first layer because they act as a really great resist, a lot more than any kind of oil or wax pencils. But unlike soft pastels, they don't move when you add water to them. And unlike oil pastels, they don't kind of gum up your brushes. They don't have that residue. So they really stay put. And that's really why I love using them as that first layer. But the soft pastels and the oil pastels are much better for the top layers, which, we'll get to once I put down my watercolors. So I am using, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the color story that I showed you in the beginning of the month. You can see the swatches on the left, and it works really well for me because I can kind of add all those pops of color with all the other stuff, but keep the watercolor color story very limited, which I do feel helps with the general cohesiveness of the painting, because most of the real estate is taken by a very kind of limited and harmonious color story that I love and feel confident kind of exploring. I already have, let's say, a go-to strategy when I'm using these kind of color stories for these kind of paintings, my loose florals. I usually start with an orange or yellow and a pink, and then I mix them to create different shades of corals and pinks and a bit of yellow, which you can see for my flowers. And then usually including a green means that I can very easily neutralize all of my pinks, and including a purple like Moonglow, it's a very muted purple, but it's still a purple, means that I can neutralize all of the yellow oranges. So that makes it very easy for me to mix unique, kind of custom made to my personal preferences, semi-neutrals and neutrals. And I really find those are the kind of colors that make a painting magical to me. I mean, obviously, I like pink. We all know this. But it's those neutrals that kind of bring everything together and make those bright colors, those bright pinks mostly that I love so much, and corals really pop. And I think that was one of those things that just took me a while to understand. And I'm not saying that, I'm so clever and I discovered something that nobody else knows. But, first of all, there are so many artists out there, and it really depends on kind of the YouTube algorithms and the mystery of, social media that kind of determines which artists you will discover, or I will discover, as I, watch a YouTube tutorial by another artist. So I'm not saying that, nobody figures out what I figure out, but many times when it comes to watercolor tutorials, there is, I would say with many artists, you get very kind of traditional use of colors and techniques. And it really took me time to, first of all, kind of unlearn and accept the fact that just because something works for someone else doesn't mean that it'll work for me. I have my own color sense and color preferences, and just because 1 or 10 or 100 artists swear by, a limited color palette that includes, I don't know, cerulean blue and raw sienna and burnt umber, something like this, it doesn't mean that I need to use those colors if I don't love them, and I don't. So, and if I just learned to mix the kind of neutrals that I love, that are exactly the tone that I like, and actually usually created with colors that I haven't seen many artists use, not these combinations. And so it's just a process that takes time, and the way to get there is just to paint a lot. Okay, now we get into the fun part. Now, what I really love about pretty much everything that I'm using in this video is that it doesn't really matter if my watercolors are still wet. All of these products, I mean, the soft pastels do change a little bit. They change somewhat, like the look of them. You can get a more muddy, messy application if you kind of, sketch with them into wet watercolor. But with the wax pastels and the oil pastels, it really doesn't matter. You get pretty much the same effect if you wait for the paint to dry or not. So if you're like me, if you're impatient, or like me, you don't have these hours to paint, or you don't have the space to work on multiple projects at one time. You need to work on something, finish it, put it aside, and then make space for something new. So these things are really important to me. And sometimes I find that I kind of have to, kind of make my art supplies, like force them to do something that maybe they're not the best at doing, because their qualities work for me. And just for example, like painting in an abstract, intuitive way, there aren't a ton of people doing that with watercolors. So it's more of like an acrylic thing because of qualities of acrylic paint. But I don't like working with acrylic paint. And I see people work with it and I love their artwork. I see also people work with, acrylics combined with watercolors. What's her name? Wendy Brightbill. I love her artwork, and she somehow knows how to use kind of everything together, and it's always magic. And I've tried recently, like I keep trying to introduce, for example, something like acrylic inks into my process, and the last attempts were just a big failure. I didn't like the way that it looked. I didn't like the process. So it's just, it takes time, and it's one of those things. I really don't think there's a way to figure out these things by watching. You can watch a lot of tutorials on how to use a product and learn a lot of very useful things. I'm not saying that, all that is useless, but you'll never discover what really works for you. And, that special formula, unless you do a lot of painting yourself and a lot of experimenting. And this painting was exactly proof of that, because I can type into the YouTube search engine how to use like soft pastel with watercolors and find a few artists. There's not a lot, but you can find a few tutorials with really helpful information. But, it's never exactly the subject you like to paint, or the colors you love to use, or exactly the techniques that you enjoy, exactly a process that works for you. There's like prep work or mediums you don't enjoy working. So it's really, you kind of have to be your own chemist and or alchemist and kind of figure out things. And this whole process, like that you see now on the screen, it was exactly that. It was a joy. And you'll see at the end of the video close-ups. There are areas, for example, where I put down an oil pastel, let's say like this ochre color, and I didn't really like that. And then I came in again and added some white oil pastel on it. And you'll see it in the close-ups. You get this kind of beautiful painterly texture that just adds a completely different dimension. It's very subtle because of the colors that I chose here, but I could definitely see myself adding that also to the centers of my florals or some petals in probably what would be like a larger piece. But then adding also, so that was a beautiful discovery that I made. And then adding those pops of color. It's so easy to do with the soft pastels and with the oil pastels, and I could do that also with watercolors. But the great thing about the soft pastels and the oil pastels is that they go on top of like everything. And with watercolors, you always kind of have to control where they go. They're sometimes more transparent. They won't go on top of like an oil pastel. So, some products are really great for those finishing touches, that they can handle anything you put underneath them. Like oil pastels are a great example for that finishing touch. And yeah, this whole process was a joy. And I really feel that it adds to kind of developing my own also signature style, but you can see how it's all like a story that is assembled from the products you choose, the techniques you use, the order you use them, and then adding your brush strokes, your line work, the painting a subject you love. There's so much that goes into it, and I'm really excited to play around with these things. And I really loved not only the process, but also the result. And if you are also interested in getting into the, how do I say, like the deeper levels of the daily practice of artwork, developing your style, understanding your process, then I highly recommend my Intuitive Painting with Watercolors course. This is basically the course. It's going into that process and learning to discover what makes you unique. It's not paint like me, come and learn how to paint like me kind of course, but it's more the come and discover, what works for you, what kind of things you want to paint. And yeah, okay, so let's get back to, I could talk about these things all day. I just really find it fascinating. And it's just, I love techniques, and I think probably my next course will be more of technique based, but I find the most rewarding, exciting part of creative practice is kind of discovering you, not just moving on from the following tutorials and kind of learning to do things like other people do them, and discovering for yourself. And it always makes me happy when people say, oh, I immediately, I saw that painting and I knew it was yours. That's one of the things that I always dreamed of, and I think I'm getting there. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this final episode in the pastel part of the series. You can see now how everything works so beautifully together. The chalk pastel, or like the soft pastels, the oil pastels, the watercolors, the first layer of wax pastels. It was just super, super fun, and I can't wait to paint more like this with these new discoveries. I'll see you soon in another video. Take care. Bye.